Okay, well, let's get started. We have Gerry P, who is going to talk about domestic violence and pets. Gerry undertook a Bachelor of Social Work degree at James Cook University and has since been working in North Queensland Domestic Violence Resource Services as the DV crisis worker for 8 years. Please let's welcome Gerry.
Everyone can hear me. I'm using this because I'm too short, I think, to stand near that. As it was introduced, yes, I'm Gerry from the Domestic Violence Service. So just a quick little brief information about what we do. Obviously, we work with victims of domestic violence as well as perpetrators through our Men's Behaviour Change program. My role is mainly around protection orders for victims of domestic violence, which can take a good couple of hours to do that paperwork. And then getting the client into either shelters or other safe accommodation. And then we also have through our services the Dovetail, which is an integrated approach to domestic violence. We have people from a variety of different services such as the court, police, probation and parole, plus other services that work with victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. And the idea is to have an appropriate response to dealing with that issue. So now I'll just go into the actual talk. Now I do hear that most of you are from different areas, and at first I was a little bit worried that my talk might be distressing to some. I mean, if you love animals, of course it's going to be. So there is a warning that it could be distressing to some. And I'd also like to acknowledge, although that I'm talking about males as the perpetrators in this situation, that is due to only my experience. I'm not saying it's only men that do this or that every man does it. It's just my personal experience. I haven't heard any stories of women doing this abuse towards animals in domestic violence. Okay, so if I could just get people to put their hand up if they own a pet. Okay, so yep, good amount. So when I talk about this, just have a think about your pet, how much you love your pet, and probably for most of us, our pet is actually our loved one, and how hard it would be to give that pet up or leave it. Leave it that it could be also getting harmed itself. Okay, so we hear stories of serial killers having a history of torturing and killing animals before going on to then kill people. Stories such as mass murderer Martin Bryant, who killed 35 people and injured 21, and Melbourne serial killer Paul Denner, who killed 3 women. However, we never hear, or we hear limited stories of the everyday partner or everyday man causing harm to pain and animals as a result of domestic violence. People rarely hear the stories I have heard, although you may have. Stories of a estranged father plucking the feathers out of his children's bird and leaving it dead for the mum and the children to find it. Or a partner beating into his dog while stating to the victim that it was her fault that he was hitting the dog. Or the partner repeatedly bashing a cow over the head with a crowbar while the female has to watch. You very rarely hear of a male partner putting a puppy in the oven and then threatening to turn that oven on. These perpetrators are not serial killers. They are fathers, husbands, brothers, and they could be your next door neighbours, your colleague, or even your boss. It is estimated that 1 in 3 women in this country experience physical violence from a man, and on average 2 women in Australia are currently dying as a result of domestic violence. 2 women, a week dying due to domestic violence. In 2013 and 14, there were over 66,000 occurrences of domestic violence reported to the Queensland Police. This equates to over 180 incidents of family violence reported every day across Queensland. 17 homicides relating to domestic and family violence occurred in Queensland between 2012 and 2013. The cost of domestic and family violence to the Queensland economy is estimated to be around 2.7 billion to 3.7 billion. So you can see that it's a huge issue. There is a recognised connection between animal cruelty and domestic violence. It is shown in a study that just over half of the family violence reported that the perpetrator had also abused the family pets. And many women said that they had delayed leaving the violent relationship out of concern for their pets. In 1994, there was almost as many domestic violence pets in Australia as people, around 17.8 million. And reasons why households kept pets included companionship, recreation and protection. Domestic and family violence is an act of violence or abuse against a member, an intimate partner. It has to be noted that domestic violence is not only physical, it is also verbal, emotional, psychological, and so on. Fear is a key element in domestic violence and is often the most powerful way a perpetrator controls their victim. Fear is created by giving looks or making gestures, possessing weapons, destroying property, and also can be cruelty to pets, or any other behaviour which can be used to intimidate or render the victim powerless. Abusers frequently use pets to manipulate their victims' emotions, such as the same way they use the children. Animals are often the easiest targets for the abuser in a violent relationship. They use a helpless companion animal as a means of control and power over their victims. Often the abuser threatens to harm or kill an animal to control the victim and keep them from leaving the abusive relationship. The abuser also can instill fear in the victim by throwing through on the threats to injure or kill an animal. This act shows the victim that the abuser is willing to kill an animal. If they are willing to kill an animal, then they also may be willing to kill the victim. On May 11th, 2008 in Mount Isa, Tyrone Gabrielle Solomon sends the owner of a Rhodesian Ridgeback Cross Great Dane a text message stating, your dog hanging, ring me. Later on, the owner's grandmother found the dog strung up by a leash, hanging in the carport. Solomon was the owner's ex-boyfriend, had been stalking her, and on previous occasions had punched her in the face and smashed her mobile phone. National surveys conducted in the USA state that 74% of pet-owning women in women's shelters reported that a pet had been threatened, injured or killed by their abuser. Not only is this injury to pets a form of abusive behaviour, it is also a signal that abusive behaviour is becoming more violent. A man in America stabbed and beheaded his wife's animals, stating that it was necessary to teach her a lesson about the importance of life. For many abused women, their animals are a source of comfort, like most of us. They provide the women with emotional support and affection that is not found elsewhere in the violent relationship. Recognising this aspect of the support, the abuser will harm or kill the animal to further isolate their victim and increase their dependence on the abuser. More often than not, victims cannot bear to leave their one source of security. For obvious reasons, harming an animal is an easy outlet for the abuser's violence. Animals are helpless and easy targets for the abusers and their aggression. Furthermore, pets have limited voice under the law and rarely have the means to escape from the violence that is inflicted on them. The RSPCA Australia recognises the link between child abuse, domestic violence and cruelty to animals, and that the cruelty to animals may be a precursor to other forms of violence. RSPCA, in conjunction with DV Connect Queensland, have set up Pets in Crisis program to assist the caring of animals for the women when they leave a domestic violence relationship. I'm not sure of the statistics now, however, when they first set up, Pets in Crisis has assisted one family a week. When domestic violence victims with pets consider fleeing abusive homes and there is limited safe place for the pets to be homed, they have little choice but to remain in the homes and subject themselves, their children and their pets to continued violence. Or they can flee and leave their pets behind and risk them from being harmed or worse, tortured or killed. Animal abuse is not just a crime. It is often a warning sign of a violent home and should be taken seriously. Women have been made to watch as pets are beaten, shot, strangled and drowned, or even put down by the perpetrator when the animal is healthy, which is a form of punishment towards the victim. As mentioned above, victims of domestic violence are very hesitant to leave a situation that involves their beloved companion animal being left behind. The laws in most states do not protect animals in situations of domestic abuse, although there is a clear link between the victim and the animals and domestic violence. Therefore, victims do not have the power under the domestic violence legislation to protect their pets and their abusers from their abusers. They can, of course, simply take the pet when they leave. However, most women's shelters do not allow victims to bring their animals due to health and safety reasons. And the rental market can discriminate against single mothers and people with animals. As a result, victims who are already hesitant to leave the violent relationship make the unfortunate and fatal decision to stay with the abuser. The Pets in Crisis program that provides safe accommodation for animals relies on foster carers to assist in looking after the animals. This is a voluntary service. There is a high demand on this service, and as a result, foster carers can't always assist with caring for the animals. Change is needed. Women and animals in domestic violence situations need safe accommodation. Local governments, along with the community and shelters, must come together to initiate safe havens. Changes to the law with added support of local government agencies and shelters would provide necessary level of protection for animals who are also the victims of domestic violence. The movement to recognise links between animal abuse and domestic violence has to start with the state laws. The state must listen to the testimony of victims and consider the studies that show clear links between domestic violence, animal abuse, and animal abuse. Governments must be more diligent in passing the bills that are presented to amend laws to include animals in protection orders. Once there is a law in place to protect the animals in domestic violence situations, victims will have the option of leaving the violent situation and will experience reassurance of knowing that the abuser is lawfully restricted from harming the animal. Also, federal and state law enforcement must take more diligent approach in recognising cross-reporting situations of animal, children and domestic violence abuse, which at the moment we don't have. That was it, thank you. Any questions?